Upgrades. Upgrades are what gives a car character. It's also what gives it the ability to go. So it's important. So I'm gonna try to explain how all the upgrades and cool shit works easily. Okay, stock Subi is okay. First thing we're gonna do, engine swaps. You just take out the old engine, throw it out, and put in a new one, a better one. Next step, we're gonna put in something called a turbo. Now, turbos are... What a turbo does is it takes all the air that's going really fast out of the exhaust and uses that to spin a little turbine. And that turbine is then hooked up to another little fan which spins and sucks in a bunch of cold air from outside. And this is important because the main limitation that an engine has is how much fuel can it blow up at once. Depends how much air you have, because you gotta have around
12 to 14 times
air as you have fuel. Otherwise it'll burn kind of badly and black smoke, and it doesn't work that well. And this deadly gas called carbon monoxide. So this turbo sucks in a bunch more air. You shove more air in, that means you can shove more fuel in, and you can get more everything and more fast. So next thing, the intake. The intake's job is basically to make sure that when the engine sucks up air, it's not also sucking up rocks and sticks and stray animals. And a better one is higher quality and can let more air in while still not sucking up stray animals. Fuel system. So the fuel system throws the fuel into the cylinder before it explodes, and it puts the right amount and at the right time. Yeah. Ignition. So the ignition is the thingy that blows up the fuel when it's time to blow it up. It's just little electric spark, boom, lights the fuel on fire, it explodes. Sometimes it kind of screws up and the fuel doesn't explode, and that's bad. So better ignition equals less bad, less knocking, yeah. Next thing is the exhaust. Well, the exhaust is the thing that takes the exploded gas, the burnt shit, out of the car and into the atmosphere so that you can pollute and cause environmental damage. And it also, in some cases, the exhaust makes the engine, the noise coming from the engine, quieter. Not with the exhaust we're putting in.
Please, what we get the most complaints about is noise.
Okay, camshaft. Okay, so I was really dumb, and at this bit I confused the crankshaft and the camshaft, and I explained how a crankshaft works. So I'm just gonna explain really quick right here how a camshaft works. Camshaft is connected to the crankshaft and is used to help the fuel injectors and the exhaust valves open up and close at the right time to move stuff in and out of the cylinder with good timing. And now you get to listen to me explain a crankshaft. This is a crankshaft. So the camshaft is basically the thingy that turns the explosion, makes the piston move up and down into rotation. How it works. Think like bike pedals, right? When you're pedaling a bike, you're just pushing down on pedals, but then when the other one comes up because it's spinning, you push down on that one. Same idea. The camshaft is basically just it's bike pedals, and that's why you can just have explosions that push to power the engine. It's just like bike pedals. Valves. Okay, so valves are basically the things that let stuff into the cylinder when you want to put things into the cylinder. And shut the fuck up, dog. Oh my god. Sorry. So basically, they open up the spot for the stuff to go into the cylinder when it's time to put stuff into the cylinder, and then close that when it explodes so that it doesn't all go back out and blow up the entire car. Actually, I don't think that would happen. And then once the explosion happens, it opens another valve to get the exploded stuff, the exhaust gas, out. And then it closes that one to start the next thing of the cycle. And yeah, better valves, more precision, more fuel and air, because bigger, yeah. So, intercooler. The way an intercooler works is, the way that an intercooler works is, basically, when the turbo sucks in a bunch of air, it kind of squishes it all together. That's called compressing it. When you squish air together, it doesn't like that, and it kind of makes it heat up a bit. Because, particles, the way particles work, when you squish them together, they move around faster, and that's called heat. So what the intercooler does is it tries to make that compressed air not hot and cool it, while still keeping it somewhat compressed. So, yeah, it also does this for superchargers and stuff too. This isn't just something used for turbos, but in this case, it is for the turbo. The flywheel. Okay, this is the last upgrade in the engine section. So the flywheel just gives the engine momentum. It's literally just a heavy disc, so that when that thing is, when the engine is spinning, shut up. It's just, so when the engine is spinning, it gives it, shut the fuck up! When the engine is spinning, it gives it momentum so that it doesn't stall out and just stop spinning. Alright, so next thing we're going to be upgrading is the platform and handling stuff. So that's pretty much things like brakes, suspension, all that. Brakes. So, the way they work is there's a disc on the wheel, and then there are these two little pads on each side of the disc, and when you hit the brakes, those pads squeeze that disc, and that causes it to rub on the disc and slow the disc down. Yeah, that's about it. Better brakes can heat up more, because what happens when you clamp that disc, that makes heat. Friction, yeah. So, better brakes don't just melt when you use them too much and too aggressively. Oh yeah, and they're also tunable, so you can adjust them and stuff. Next thing, springs. That means suspension. So suspension, springs, and dampers are basically responsible for A, making it so that the car doesn't fucking shatter when it hits a bump, B, how high up the car is, and C, making sure that those wheels don't just jump off the ground and lose all their grip whenever the road's bumpy. So, this car I'm setting up to be basically a race car, so we're going to assume that we're on a racetrack / road, and we're going to put on springs that don't really let the wheels move around too much, that are pretty stiff, but that are really low to the ground. So I'm picking the drift springs, not for drifting, just because they're really, really low. I like to have low springs because A, it's cool. Who doesn't love having a low car? It looks fucking sick. And B, because this thing that happens with aerodynamics, what the fuck do they call it? Where when the car is lowered, basically car lower to the ground equals better aerodynamic fast. Yeah, it's gooder. Anti-roll bars. You'll see that I'm putting these on both the front and the back. They just make sure that the car doesn't go bendy when there's a lot of G-force. It doesn't bend. That's the best way to describe it. Because the car can kind of act like its own bit of the suspension by literally just bending the whole ass car. Chassis reinforcement / roll cage. Okay, people are gonna hate me for saying this, but roll cages are partially for safety reasons. I know, it's shocking, but they're also to prevent the whole thing from bending and shit. Roll cages are actually an amazing thing, because if you look at videos of rally crashes and things like that, roll cages can save people in crashes from just about anything. They're not practical for normal road cars, which is why they're not implemented in them, mostly. They make the car near indestructible. It doesn't mean that you're completely safe, but the car can take a way bigger crash and you'll still be fine. And I mean way bigger.
châssis est détruit.
Weight reduction. Weight reduction is, well, it's what it sounds like. It's just ripping out unnecessary shit so that the car is less heavy, you know? Spare tire? Who the fuck needs a spare tire? It's a race car. You know, back seats. You don't have friends. Hell, you don't even need a fucking passenger seat. You don't have friends. Nobody's gonna be in that car. Drivetrain. So, the drivetrain section is basically all the stuff that is between the engine and the wheels. First thing in here, clutch. The clutch's job is when you're shifting from one gear to the next, you kind of can't have the engine like still powering that while you're doing that, otherwise the gears will just grind really hard and it will be terrible. So the clutch just kind of disconnects those temporarily. It's sort of like the opposite of a brake, where when you're not using it, it's gripping on and spinning, but when you are using it, it just kind of lets go. And yeah, it's pretty important. So the transmission. So I'm putting in a race transmission, as Forza calls it. It doesn't have any more gears than the normal transmission, but I mean, you probably know how gears work, unless you're an American and drive automatic. There are obviously different kinds of transmissions. Forza doesn't specify what type of transmission this is. But yeah, reduced shift time, that's cool. It's also probably lighter, if I had to guess. And there is how effective it is at transferring torque. So some transmissions, especially automatic ones, they're not very good at actually like transferring that power. Once you kind of get the turning coming out of the transmission, it's like not as strong, it's not as torquey. So some transmissions are better at that than others. This one I'm hoping is better. Alright, and then next up, driveline. So the driveline is basically, have you ever looked under one of those big trucks and seen that spinning rod under it? That's a driveline. I don't know why they're visible on trucks. It's, I guess, because they're just fucking lazy when they build them and they don't want to cover them up with some nice cheap Chinese plastic or some shit. I don't know. Yeah, the driveline is basically just what takes the spinny from the front also to the back. Because the Subi is all-wheel drive, which means all the wheels are being driven by the engine at once. So you need the spinny in the front and the spinny in the back. So this brings the spinny to the back. And upgrading it makes it lighter and stronger. Not that it can actually break in Forza, because the damage is not that complex. But yeah, it makes it lighter, makes it stronger. Differential. Okay, so the differential's job is basically, how much more or less can one wheel turn than another wheel that's being powered? Because here's the thing, let's say you're going around a turn. You know that the inside of a turn is shorter than the outside, right? Well, that means that the wheels on the inside of a turn you're making turn less than the wheels on the outside. And the problem is, when you're trying to get power to both of those wheels, you kind of have to set a limit as to how much that can be different, because of like science and shit. Otherwise you can't really send power to those wheels. And you can do all kinds of interesting things by changing that limit. You know, you can have it somewhat open and still have a lot more power, but then also not just have them locked with each other, otherwise they'll be sliding around, which is what we're gonna do with the race diff. Or you can just lock them up relative to each other and have them just kind of spin like nuts, and that's a drift differential. They call that a welded diff. Those are fun, but not for actual performance in racing. And that's about it. So, tires and rims. It's, yeah, you probably know what tires and rims are. Tire compound. So, this is basically, you know how when you get tires for your car, you can get like sports tires, or, you know, well, basically the tire compound is like what kind of tread does it have, what material is it made out of. Racing tires, which is what we're going to be putting on, we're going to be putting on something called semi-slick racing tires. They're really soft, which means they get kind of destroyed quicker, and you have to get new ones quicker, but they have way better grip. The other difference is Semi-slick tires are really smooth, and they only have a little bit of tread. You may know from, the law, that you're supposed to have tread on your tires. That's because when you don't have tread, and the road isn't perfect, non-wet, non-dirty, perfect temperature, if it's not like the perfect road, not having tread is bad. If you're not on a asphalt road, let's say you're on a dirt road and you don't have tread, you were fucked. Yeah, so basically, racing slicks are great on the road, and these tires we're putting on are semi-slicks, which means they have some tread, so it's like, if we end up on a tough surface, at least we can still, do something, We can probably go in the rain, maybe. Tire width, tire width is what it sounds like, yeah. Wider tires equals bigger area to grip the road, more grip to the road. It's great. Rim style, yeah, this is purely aesthetic. These ones look fucking sick though, don't they? Like, seriously, I fucking love these. And then there's track width. Track width is just how wide out do the wheels stick. And, well, the wider they are, the more stable you're gonna be, right? Like, that's why, when you plant your feet to get stable for something, you spread them apart, And, yeah, you spread the wheels a bit further apart and bam, more stable, more gooder. Yeah. Last but not least, aero and appearance. I like this part. Okay, first thing we're gonna do, on the front bumper, we're gonna add on this. And this is called a splitter. So what a front splitter does is basically splits the air there. Low pressure air goes under the car, high pressure air goes over the car. Basically, small amount of air under, big amount of air over, and that pushes the car more down to the road. So, yeah, that means A, it's lower, so it's cooler, and B, more downforce, more grip, more better, more fast, good. Yeah. Okay, next up is the rear wing. The rear wing, it's kind of like a plane wing, but the other way. It works more, doesn't work like that because it's not an airfoil. Think of it like the fan blade on your fan at home, kind of, more that kind of physics shape. But, basically, it's a wing, but instead of going up, it goes down, and it pushes down, and the car gets pushed down, more downforce again, more good, and it's at the back, which is, generally the really unstable part. So, yeah, big wing, big good, to sum it up. Don't put a comically large wing, though. Those are fucking dumb. And, yeah. That's it for the upgrades. So... Okay, so it's come to my attention that a lot of people have shitty PCs. Shit! The Heavy Tea is sponsored by Stoneforge Tech. Stoneforge happens to make really good PCs. But they're really cool, and if you look at their Twitter, you'll see they post, actually funny memes.
What the dog doing?
And they show, building the PCs. Okay, and seriously though, props to whoever's running their social media. You're cool.
I like this one.
I'm not going to explain all the numbers and all that shit, because that's their job. They can figure that out for you. You can ask them about all kinds of stuff. You can ask them literally anything. So, Stoneforged is having a bit of a sale for the rest of April. You can also use code THIGHVT to get 5% off. That also supports me and the rest of THIGHVT, which is pretty cool. So go to stoneforge.tech and check them out. That's it for the upgrades. So...
Turn your